Nope.
Alright, hello everybody, I'm James, and with me today I have Kevin, and we're making a video to help you guys understand object-oriented programming. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you guys through the library class that all of us are very familiar with, and hopefully that'll give you a better understanding of the concepts we covered in class over the last few weeks.
Alright, first, we look at the class libMember. Look at all these variables. It is important to distinguish one from another to avoid confusion. The author is smart. He's a genius to write comments next to each variable describing its purpose. As we go through the methods, we will see which one is an instant variable, a static variable, a reference variable, and even a local variable.
Wow, local variables? Oh my goodness, they're so exciting. Alright, Kevin. Moving on, we look at the method public libMember, and we see that name is set to a pair of empty quotation marks. We also see a couple of other things. Important to know, num checked out is set to 0, and titles 1, title 2, and title 3 are all set to no. This is set up so that the variables will have values before being interacted with by the user. The null is used when the variable is not referring to an object. Number checked out, name, title 1, title 2, and title 3 are instance variables. Remember, since that name, title 1, title 2, and title 3 are variables that last through the object's lifetime. Those are the definitions of instance variables.
Public libMember, parentheses, string n, is a method that is used when creating a new member. It sets up the name of the member when creating the libMember, making it easier to keep track of who is checking out books and who is checking in books. Public void setCopies int c is a mutator method that changes the number of books the member checks out.
So we also look at public void setTitle that takes an int ID and an int string, and that's also a mutator method that keeps track of the total number of unique books, which limits it to 3. And makes it that each book can have a title that can be changed into a different title. No books can be added so that there can be no more than 3 books with one unique title with each book, and you can only replace one title at a time.
Okay. Public string getNames is an accessor method that shows the name stored in the variable name within the object. Max checkout is a static variable since it belongs in a class that cannot be accessed by the objects in the class. Each object library member is capable of using this method.
Alright everyone, so now we're going to look at the mutator method public boolean check-in-book, which takes in a parameter of string t. Everyone can see the comments? And alright. So, once again, each object, libMember, has this method. It's the same with the next method, findBook, which also takes a string t. Please look at this method and read the comment above it. This method is an accessor method since it allows the library member to see if he checked out a particular book.
Finally, we have the toString. Every time the object of the class is printed out, the data of the object, including the name and its titles, will be printed out in a string.
So, now we're going to see the library member in use.
Are we?
You guys go off to your coffee break. Now then, everyone, you will now look at the next class project video. Looking at the first line, we see member 1, member 2, and member 3 being instantiated and set to null. Right there. They can now be called null references. The user can enter his or her name, which is stored in the variable n. Member's one name is set equal to n. Member 2 is just a variable referring to the same object as member 1. Member 3 refers to a different object that contains the same name. So if we look into this file, this is where they're at first null, reference objects, and this is now where they're now member 1, member 2, member 3. They all instantiate into their own objects, their names set to n, and member 3 is set to a different object, its name set to the same n, or whatever you put into that n.
Is it online?
Okay, going back to this, the integer number copies out is set equal to 2, and after that t is instantiated as a string and is set equal to the method change member with the parameters member 1 and number copies out. Now let's look at the method static string change member below. The value contains an integer and n is increased by 1. So now it's 3. Tile 1, tile 2, and tile 3 are all instantiated as string variables set equal to their own title. The object member 1 then sets title 1, title 2, and title 3 to their respective titles. So, going back here, we go to set title, and looking at that, you see that the integer ID that's being put in is 1, and then you go to there, and if since it's ID 1, title 1 is set to the title 2 being interpreted, so title 1 for this object is tractors are people 2, and for number ID 2, title 3 would be set to title 2, so title 2 would be equal to summer vacation should be cancelled, and then title 3 would just be climbing trees for beginners. So it'll end up like this. And the numbers checked out will be set equal to 3 here, and you're using set copies and set title. Those are the methods the objects can have access to. Now you notice that tile 1, tile 2, and tile 3 are the same as the variables mentioned here in the libmember class, but these variables are different. These variables are actually local variables. They aren't like instant variables. They last through the method's lifetime instead of the object's lifetime. So looking at the next line, m.setCopies n will take us back to the set copies, the method set copies. So if we go there,
So the score is supposed to be here, right?
the number checked out will be set equal to 3. So looking at here, this is how what it will be set equal to 3 for this specific object, member 1. And then the return title 2, that's just basically tractors are people 2, so basically T is referring to tractors are per people 2. So then what happens here, and member going back up, member 2.checkin book T means that it's checking member 2 and member 1 referring to the same object are checking in the book T. So then that means they already checked that book out, so that means they would have no problem checking it back in. It's because title 1 is already set equal to the T. So if title 1 equals T, then that means, and it's not equal to null, then that means it will be set back equal to null, and the num checked out will decrease by 1, and it will return true. So when that happens,
So would it be
the num checked out will be set equal to 2, and tile 1 will be set to null, and the method used is check-in book. Now going back here, member 3, on the other hand, wants to check out the book. And member 3, back here, didn't have any titles, all the titles were set to null, and the number checked out was 0. So that means it's okay for him to check out a book, because number checked out is less than max checkout, so the boolean checkout OK will be returned true. Then that means if checkout OK equals true, then that means then tile 1, if tile 1 is set to null, then tile 1 will be set to T. So then that means she'll check in tractors are people too, using that method. And the number checked out will increase by 1. So, when you system.out println T, what you would get out of that is you would get tractors are people too, because that's what it's stored as. And then system.out println number copies out, that will just be 2. And for system.out println member 1, member 2, member 3, for all that you have to, that'll just take you to the toString, right to the toString. And altogether it'll return the member, the name, number books out, and including the books titles, and then the number checked out, plus the books out. So then what happens here is that member will be n, whatever you set the number books out will just be 2. Books would be summer vacation should be cancelled, or and climbing trees for beginners. And for system.out println member 2, it's the same thing because they're referring to the same object. So that means they'll both have the same stuff being printed out. But system.out println member 3 on the other hand has the same name, so print out member n, or whatever you store for n. Number of books out is set to 1 because he checked out 1 book. Books that he has is just tractors that are people too.
We hope this video helps you have a better understanding of objects and memory. God, I can promise you no one is going to be able to understand that. Okay. Yep.
Remember, everybody, good commenting and sound logic are the keys to a successful coding career.